There's just so much, external stressors and pressures on all of us, that the idea of having well-being amidst all of this is, it has been sort of a struggle for people to wrap their minds around. And that has been a big focus of mine for a decade, is looking at workplace happiness and how we can actually spend our 115,000 hours at work in our lifetime a little bit better, a little bit healthier. And obviously, because I've been focused on burnout, try to prevent the things that are making us really unwell, very sick. So really, the fact that so many of us are disengaged, and that's around 15% of the global workforce is actually disengaged. Most of us are leaving work like this on a Friday. We're ready to just get the heck out of there. There's a huge swath of us that are actually, completely disengaged, but most of us are sort of in that middle spot where we go into work, we don't feel a ton of meaning or purpose in what we do. And so then it's about living outside of work. However, this year has really changed that concept. And I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but the idea of, working from home is now living at work. We're in a whole different kind of situation where if we're on the front lines and we're feeling unsafe about going to work, there's all these different sort of pressures that are kind of culminating into us feeling less and less engaged. And a big part of that is just the fact that we are burning out. And I'm going to share some of that data with you so that you can understand just how bad it really is this year. But it's been a problem for a long time. It's just we're now really understanding how many of those systems were broken that could lead us to this burnout crises, this epidemic of burnout. So here are the 6 root causes. And what I want to just share with you quickly is that in 2019, the WHO, the World Health Organization, actually added burnout to its classification of diseases, its ICD. And it doesn't necessarily go so far as to say that burnout is a syndrome, is a disease, but it does say specifically that it's about stress that is unmanaged in the workplace. So it's an occupational phenomena, which was a major shift in how we thought about burnout before. We sort of saw it as a work-life thing, which does play a role, yes, but that it is really about unmanaged stress at work. And the 6 root causes of burnout are really about systems and infrastructure and policies that are broken, and they are not supporting employee well-being and health. Those are unsustainable workload, which means just overwork, too much work. We've seen that this year. I'll talk about some of the stats of how much more we're working in a pandemic. Perceived lack of control. So that feeling of being micromanaged, and actually we've seen a lot of, people that are feeling controlled, but also managers that have had to suddenly go from seeing someone in the office every day, being able to check in by walking by their desk, are now managing remote teams. So they're feeling a need to maybe control more. Uncertainty makes us need to control more. So that's playing a role. Insufficient rewards for effort. So we see this a lot in industries like healthcare, in nurses and teachers, and we see this across first responders, police officers. There's a lot of data that I include in the book around those groups. And that is essentially that they're just working so much more extra overtime to meet the demands of the job, and that compensation isn't actually equating to the amount that they're working. Also, just that they're not maybe feeling recognized or rewarded for their work in the way that they believe that they should be. We're also seeing that in recognition programs. Are people actually being acknowledged for their work in the way that they need to be acknowledged? Are the right people being celebrated in the organization? So all of these things predict burnout. Lack of supportive community is the idea that we're losing, our relationships with our friends. Having really good relationships with at least, 1 or 2 people in the workplace can mean the difference of being engaged and purpose-driven and finding meaning in work and reducing burnout, to the antithesis of that. And I'll talk about that as well. Lack of fairness. So we see these obviously in lack of diversity and inclusion. We see this in the delta between what women are being paid versus their counterparts. We see this just in general where we aren't seeing equity across the board, and that can lead to burnout. And then, mismatched values and skills. So we see this in economic crises where people end up going back to school because they don't have jobs and they become overqualified. And then you have a glut of overqualified talent on on the market, and then they are not necessarily being valued for their work. So these are the 6 root causes of burnout. And I think for many of you, and for me too, before I really dug into the research around burnout, I thought of burnout as something totally different. And so this is really, important for us to discuss, because again, it's systems, policies, infrastructure in the workplace.